UFC Fight Night Abu Dhabi, Whittaker versus Derrida takes place this weekend, and I'm going to go through the entire card, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main events, giving my prediction and breakdown for every single fight on the card, and this card is absolutely stacked as well. Let's start straight away with the early prelim opener of Martin Buday versus Marcus Buchecha. I'm going to go with Marcus Buchecha, or however you pronounce his surname. He is a multiple-time Jiu-Jitsu world champion, ADCC world champion. I think he's in the IBJJF Hall of Fame as well. So this guy is, you know, he's won it all when it comes to jiu-jitsu, and he's a heavyweight man. He's a large dude. I don't think he's 6'4". He's going to be noticeably shorter than Martin Buday, so the height is completely wrong in my opinion. However, he's transitioned to MMA. He started his MMA transition in 2020. That's when he said he was committing to it. So maybe he trained for a few years before then as well in some mixed martial arts stuff, but not too seriously. So he's had some time to adjust. And they did put him against some decent level of competition at ONE FC as well. He fought some pretty good opponents. Like, not good by any means, don't get me wrong. But they had records. He wasn't going in there, and he hasn't gone 5-1 against absolute schmucks. Like, when he was 2-0, I think he fought a guy that was 5-1. You know what I mean? So they're finding people with some level of experience and some prospect of their own right to take on this guy because of the background in jiu-jitsu that he has. Like, this isn't some random guy signing up for his MMA debut. They knew he was somewhat good, so they put him against decent comp, and they put him against Rug, and you know what? He showed toughness in that fight, and even though he lost, I'm going to take that as something, because when Bo Nickel got the chance to show some toughness, you know, I'm not saying they're the same in any way, but when Bo Nickel got a chance to show some toughness after his MMA transition, hunched over in the ball on the ground. So, Marcus Buchecha was getting hit by Rug, who's a sourced up, I think he's a Senegalese wrestler. He's got a background in wrestling, so he actually could deal with Buchecha's takedowns quite well and survived some scary moments at the end of the rounds. But he also did a lot of damage to Buchecha early in the fight because he had a massive swelling up eye, hematoma here and there. So Buchecha toughed out a fight where he got given a lot of problems early, and he was still able to get some grappling off, but he did lose. And it did look terrible because Rug's not top level. I think Rug could maybe get ranked in the UFC. So I think Buchecha's problems are going to come when he takes on someone who is, you know, in shape enough to move their feet underneath them without plodding around. Martin Buday's a plodder. I like Martin Buday. He's actually underratedly good. I think he's got a UFC record of something like 6-1. And the only guy he lost to is Shamil Gaziev, the great one himself. So I don't think he's all that bad, but I do think that if he does get taken down by Buchecha, he's cooked. And that he will get taken down. And I don't think he can be too effective without moving forward and trying to pressure Buchecha. And he's got a nasty double leg. But Marcus Buchecha's got a nasty double leg. Some of the takedowns I've seen him get aren't even correct looking in any way whatsoever, but he just manages to like keep a hold of both legs. Like, he'll roll for a leg lock and then immediately bail on it to try and get top position. I trust in Buchecha here. I'm going to say Buchecha gets this one done. Early submission. In fact, round 1 submission. I'm going to say that Buchecha gets this one done. But we now move on to the sponsor of today's video, Prize Picks. Go over to prizepicks.com. They're the sponsor of today's video. New users play $5, get $50 instantly in lineups. And that's for new signups that use code GURU. You've got to use code GURU to do that. I'm going to go with this week. I'm going to say that Carlos Leal, who's on this card, is going to fight for less than 9.75 minutes fight time against Muslim Salikhov. I see a high chance of a finish there. I also think that Bogdan Guskov is going to fight for more and land more in his fight than 15.5 significant strikes. And I also think that Marcus McGhee is going to land less than 72.5 significant strikes. That's what I'm going for this week. 20 gets you 120. New signups, use code GURU. Get 50 to use in lineups from your first 5. Moving back to the video of Whittaker versus Derrida predictions, we move on up the card to another fight. Mohammed Yahya versus Stephen Nguyen. Or however you pronounce that surname, I'll never understand how to pronounce that surname. Nguyen? I don't know how to pronounce it. If I really tried a different style of pronouncing it, a slur may come out. So I'm just going to leave it there. I don't know how to put the N and the G next to each other. So we're going to go with Steven, is what we're going to go with here. He'll beat Mohammed Yahya. Yahya's shit. Like, he is. Mohammed Yahya's dog shit. Steven Nguyen, he's been around for a long time. You know, he lost against, I think the guy's called Aaron Cruz or something along that line. I can't remember the name of it, but the guy that he fought on the Contender Series, very early doors on the Contender Series as well. There was a time when he was like a young 20-something-year-old guy trying to get into the UFC, and he got finished by Alon Cruz. That's his name. Alon Cruz. Alon Cruz. A weird name to go for, but yeah, he knocked him out on the Contender Series a long time ago. And Nguyen's had a bit of mixed results. You know, he had a good scrap in his debut against Jaron Aarons, which isn't the best guy to lose to, don't get me wrong, but Mohammed Yahya, destroyed by Kaue Fernandez in his last fight, beat the fuck out of by Trevor Peek. I think Steven, let's say, I think Steven can do what Trevor Peek did, but a little bit more technical, which is actually going to give less moments of opportunity to Mohammed Yahya. Steven's a very well-rounded fighter. He doesn't really excel and stand out in any particular area, but there's also not a lot of, like, weakness that you can point out. You can't say, he's really terrible at this or really terrible at that. He seems to have it all figured out, and his losses have actually made him better over the years, but sometimes he does seem to get outdone. I just don't see him getting outdone by Mohammed Yahya. Let's face it, the only reason this guy was signed in the first place is because he's from Abu Dhabi, and he's the only fighter in UFC history from Abu Dhabi in my memory. I think he's the only fighter in UFC history from Abu Dhabi, and he's the only one on the roster now. So they're keeping him on the roster, even though he's losing, because Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia have no fighters. So they're putting him on the cards or keeping him in the sport because Mohammed Yahya's all they've got. And so far, he's professionally got his ass whooped twice. So I'm going to go with Steven to win this fight. I think he's a little bit more well-rounded, a little bit better on the feet, a little bit more disciplined and composed in there. So I'm going to say that he wins a 30-27 decision, outdoing Mohammed Yahya every single round on his way to a decision win. So I'm going to go with Steven getting this one done. I don't see him really going too far in the sport, but I think he's enough to beat Mohammed Yahya. Okay? So I'm going to go with Steven. We move on up the card to another fight, which is Ibo Aslan versus Billy Elekana. Turkish power, gyno power, they call it as well. Beaten by the great Kutalaba in his last fight by submission. A little bit of a wild fight in the first round where there was a lot of grappling situations. And, you know, other than that, he finished Anton Turkali or Turkalj, however you pronounce his surname. He beat him by third round finish. That was a guy who he actually lost to on the regional scene. That was his other loss out of his two losses. Was a submission defeat to Anton Turkalj. Billy Elekana had Bogdan Guskov's back for near a whole round in his debut on short notice. And Bogdan Guskov is good. And he can grapple and he knows what he's doing in the grappling. I kind of want to go with Billy Elekana to get this one done. I don't even know the odds. I don't even know the odds for this fight. I'm going to be real with you guys. But I feel like Billy Elekana is going to be a slight underdog, or this is going to be somewhat evens. I'm going to go with Billy Elekana here. I think he's actually somewhat technical. There are some fights that I haven't really liked the look of in his regional scene. He had a split decision with a Chuck Campbell or something along those lines. And I thought it was a pretty messy looking fight. But Ibo Aslan, if you mix it up on him, you can do well. You know, if you give him a few things to think about, he's not as dominant. Even against Anton Turkalj, who's very sloppy on the feet. He left a lot of openings there. So you know what? I'm going to go against Turkish power. And I'm going to go against Ibo Aslan. I know there's a fan base out there right now, and this is their guy, and this is Turkey's guy. And they're going to be upset about that. But you know what? I'm going to go with Billy Elekana. There was, yes or no, there was a moment in that Bogdan Guskov debut, who's very good and is going to be on this card later on. There was a moment in that Bogdan Guskov debut where you thought, hang on a minute. You had a little bit of a CTE Volk moment. Hang on a minute. What's going on here? Hang on a minute. He was on his back the whole time, scrambling very well, and it seemed like Guskov couldn't shake him off. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Billy Elekana. I'm going to trust in his dynamic ability to get positions like the back, to get positions on top position, and shoot takedowns in interesting ways. I think he's a wild card. I think he's a bit like a light heavy or a light heavyweight Oliveira. not as good. I don't know. I always compared them to Oliveira. I'm not saying they're as good as him or they've achieved as much as him or anything like that. I just mean that they have like weird finishing potential, even though their technicality doesn't seem up to par. That's what I mean when I relate them to Oliveira. So I'm going to go with Billy Elekana. I'm going to trust Billy Elekana to get this one done. Probably by submission. I'm going to say rear naked choke submission. Second round for Billy Elekana getting this one done. We move on. Up the card to another fight, which is Amanda Ribas versus Tabatha Ricci. It's a tricky one, but I'm going to go with Amanda Ribas. Am I going to go with Amanda Ribas? I don't really know what to go with on this one, to be honest with you guys. I've been trying to think about it. Tabatha Ricci has some pretty underrated wins. She has a win over Gillian Robertson, which is a clear win from her. This is the problem that I have. That it's going to be a 29-28 decision, likely. It's quite likely to be a 29-28 decision. And I don't know what Ricci has done backstage, but they love giving her robbery decisions. She has not won half of her fights that they've given her in the UFC. Clearly, in my opinion, I thought she lost to Angela Hill. I thought she lost to, who was the other girl? Tiny Tornado. Tisha Pennington now. I thought she lost that fight as well. I think Tabatha Ricci has been gifted so many fights in her career. And it makes me go into this, and even though I just said maybe Ribas, it makes me go into this with the mindset of, oh, well, you know, I'm picking against her because she hasn't won any of her fights that they actually said that she won. But at the same time, I'm thinking, well, they keep giving her these close fights when she's doing fuck all. Ribas has been finished quite a lot now. She's a little chinny as well in moments. She's coming off of a loss to Mackenzie Dern by submission in her return to the strawweight division, where she was shooting takedowns on Mackenzie Dern. It can't be trusted. She can't be trusted. I'm going with Tabatha Ricci. Even if it's a close 29-28 decision, she'll get given a robbery victory anyway. I'm going with Tabatha Ricci to get this one done. She's an industry plant. Same with her boyfriend, Callum Walsh, the boxer, who's like the UFC's poster boy in boxing pretty much. They always post about whenever he has a fight against some random guy. So I'm going to go with Tabatha Ricci getting this one done. Robbery, 29-28 decision. Don't hate the player, hate the game. We move on. Up the card to another fight, which is Davey Grant versus Damon Blackshear. Now, as a seasoned MMA predictor, you guys know I'm tempted. Everybody's tempted to go with a nice old Davey Grant pick now and then. And I am. As someone who's seen many UFC fights and many Davey Grant fights, I'm very tempted. However, I think Damon Blackshear's submission and grappling game is a little bit underrated. And I think his performance against Heli Lateng was actually really good and composed. The performance that he had against Cody Gibson made me think a guy like Davey Grant would chew him up. But sometimes people have bad performances. They do. Sometimes people have bad performances. I'm not going to judge Damon Blackshear on his worst performance that I've seen from him. By the way, his worst performance isn't even his loss. That's still a win. He beat Cody Gibson and submitted him and beat him. Cody Gibson kind of threw it away, it seemed. But maybe Cody Gibson just couldn't do enough to win. And if he, like, by doing as much as he needed to do to win, he left himself open for being finished at the same time because of the pressure that he was putting on Damon Blackshear. So, you know what? I'm going to go with Damon Blackshear. And I said, his worst performance isn't his loss. Because the fight with Mario Batista that he had, he could have won it. He actually could have won that fight. I lean towards Mario Batista. Very close fight, though. And I could see people scoring that towards Damon Blackshear. Very, very close fight. So I think that aged very well for Damon Blackshear. So, listen, if I was just going to judge this off of the Damon Blackshear performance against Cody Gibson, no brainer, I'm taking Davey Grant. I'm judging it based on everything else. Yes, he got chinned by Montel Jackson early. I don't think he's going to get chinned by Davey Grant down the pipe. Grant throws wild shit, which is like, sure, it has a higher chance of KOing you because it's a massive, powerful shot, and that's why Davey Grant has so many finishes. However, it's also easier to see coming. And Damon Blackshear showed pretty decent striking defense against Heli Lateng. While he was pushing Lateng backwards, he was doing pretty good defensively in his striking. So I'm going to go with Damon Blackshear. I like Davey Grant. I really like Davey Grant. But I think there comes a time, especially after his neck surgery and some of the time off that he's had, where we aren't going to see peak Davey Grant anymore. And it's sad because I think Davey Grant beat Adrian Yanez. You know, I think Davey Grant won another fight that he got robbed in, and I can't remember the name of the guy that he got robbed against, but there was another fight in Davey Grant's career where he got pretty badly robbed, and I thought he very clearly won against Daniel Marcos. But Daniel Marcos is a little bit one-dimensional. And if he doesn't have much of a physicality advantage, he seems to struggle. I feel like Damon Blackshear is rangy, tricky, technical, well-rounded, will grapple, will mix in submissions if he needs to. So I'm going to pick him to beat Davey Grant here. It sucks. I think Davey Grant, at his peak, should have been a ranked bantamweight because of the wins that he had against Yanez and Daniel Marcos. He should have been. But the surgeries, the time off, he's getting up there in age. I'm going to go against Davey Grant. And he gets robbed. They rob the old guy that they're paying a lot of money for in favor of the prospect. So if anyone's going to win a close decision, it's going to be Damon Blackshear. So I'm going to go with Damon Blackshear to get this one done. Plus, there was another fight of Davey Grant's career where, you know, he had good moments, but there's moments where he doesn't. Like, he got dropped really badly by Jonathan Martinez, came back and knocked him out in the second round. Then there was another fight that Davey Grant had against Louis Smolka, where he actually finished Smolka in the third round. Dominant third round, dominant first round. Second round, Smolka starts tagging him really badly on the face. And once he got that momentum, Grant really struggled to shake it, and he had to have a complete round reset until he went back out there in the third and changed it up again. I think Damon Blackshear can do that. I think he can do that. I think he can push and build in momentum and volume. I'm going to take Damon Blackshear to get this one done by finish. Submission TKO, second round finish for Damon Blackshear after a bit of a tough and wild first round. I've got Damon Blackshear getting this one done. We move on. Up the card to another fight. Muslim Salikhov versus Carlos Leal. I'm going to go over Leal. He's a monster. He is. A lot of people accuse him of roids because he's tested positive before, I'm pretty sure. He's had multiple fights overturned for drug testing. But the UFC just signed him because the UFC don't care about roids. John Jones is the GOAT. And he's allowed to use them. They pick and choose who they allow to based on marketability and excitement. So, yeah, it's one of those things. Maybe Leal's come off them now, but he's still a monster. Absolute beast. And Salikhov, he's getting up there. And Randy Brown chinned the fuck out of him. And he's had some fights here and there where he'll bounce back and get a spinning wheel kick KO and spinning back kick KO to the face. And all of a sudden it's like, damn, who's this Muslim Salikhov guy? He's a real prospect. But he's getting up there in age. He's got a reach disadvantage here against Carlos Leal. And I don't see Leal playing the striking at range game with him. I see him getting in Salikhov's face and treating him like a 40-year-old man. I know Leal isn't that old either, or isn't that young either, but he's definitely got more in the tank at this point in his career. And I think he can push Salikhov up against a cage and beat the shit out of him there like he did against Alex Morono. I think it will take longer to get him there, and I think it will take him, you know, maybe into the second round to get him into that position rather than doing Morono in the first, the way that he did. But Carlos Leal, I mean, he ain't got to worry about takedowns here. Salikhov, despite his name and first name and beard and hair, like, he doesn't grapple. Like, he's a pure striker. He's the king of Kung Fu, is the nickname of Salikhov. He's a spinning kick guy. He's a kick guy. He throws a ton of kicks, ton of punches. He's also very explosive himself. I think that will leave him in danger against Carlos Leal. So I'm going to say that Carlos Leal, tricky first round, gets the better of it. Maybe Salikhov has some moments. Leal maybe gets a takedown, pushes him up against a cage, beats him up a little bit there at the end of the first. Round two, he gets him up against that cage again and finishes him, I reckon, this time. So Carlos Leal, round two, TKO. We move on. Up the card. Bryce Mitchell versus Saeed Nurmagomedov. Roll Tide, brother! He's not even from Alabama, so I don't know if I should say Roll Tide, but whatever the Arkansas equivalent is, Bryce Mitchell's going to get this one done against Saeed Nurmagomedov, and you know it's true. You know it's true, and I'll tell you why. Bryce Mitchell, if you've heard any of his stories on Fight Week, has already had warm-ups fighting Saeed Nurmagomedov's lot in the locker room when he was getting changed. He was ready to go, okay? That's how locked in Bryce Mitchell is for this moment, dude. He's ready at any time to throw hands, even if it's chilly, okay? Which he said it was, and everyone needs to know that it was chilly that day, okay? But Bryce Mitchell versus Saeed Nurmagomedov's the matchup. I am incredibly worried about this because Bryce Mitchell, he gets guillotine. Like, there's guillotine potential against Bryce Mitchell, but only Gene Silver's really been able to do it. The problem that I have with it, though, is that Said Nurmagomedov has some of the nastiest front chokes in the game and a really nasty guillotine as well. But I'm assuming that they know that. That they know that going into this fight with Said Nurmagomedov at bantamweight, Said is very dangerous with the front chokes and the guillotines. And I assume that they're aware of this reality, okay, when they're going to be shooting that takedown. So at this point, it must be known. I think Said Nurmagomedov caught Cody Stamen with that front choke with the guillotine, and he's done a few others like that as well. Said Yakub-Kakhramonov got done with it too. But Said Yakub-Kakhramonov was trying to kind of ragdoll in Said Nurmagomedov before that moment. Before he got caught in that guillotine, he was chucking him about a little bit. So, listen, Said Nurmagomedov's good, but is he that good? He's decent. But there's a lot of moments in his fights where I'm like, ugh, he's slowing down here. He's getting tired here. Flashy kick, spinning kick here and there, dynamic move here and there. I think Bryce Mitchell's typically quite difficult to finish. I do worry about a spinning back kick to the body here against Mitchell going down to bantamweight. But Mitchell with a size advantage over his opponents and a strength advantage over his opponents, I feel like Mitchell could get this done. I didn't mind the way he was looking on the feet in round one against, what's his name? Gene Silver, even though Gene was kind of like coaxing him into the fight and trying to get Bryce to open up a little bit. I still didn't mind the way Bryce looked in that first round outside of getting caught in that guillotine. So I'm not just saying this because I'm biased. I feel like Bryce can pull this one off. So I'm going to go with Bryce Mitchell. And I'm actually going to say that he gets this one done by decision. We've seen Said Nurmagomedov fraud checked by Jonathan Martinez, where he kind of got bullied around and low kicked and he was kind of panicking up against the cage in moments. And he's had other moments in fights where he's been slowing down and wheel kicking, ended up on bottom position. I think it was against Barcelos, if I'm not mistaken. But I'm going to go with Bryce Mitchell. 5'10", Bryce Mitchell, at bantamweight, tall, strong, lean and mean. I reckon he might have a bit of a strength advantage and a grappling advantage here, and I don't think his stand-up's that bad. And you know what I've noticed about bantamweights? Bantamweight, featherweight, I feel like we've kind of been bigging up bantamweights a little too much with some of the recent performances that I've seen from them. And even some of the featherweights as well. You know, you might say Bryce isn't all that, he's not that great on the feet. I don't think you have to be that great, really. Barcelos ain't that great on the feet. He can still fraud check Peyton Tabit and fraud check others on the feet. Garbrandt, who was a former champion for the division. So let's take this with a pinch of salt. I think physicality will be the difference. And I think Bryce Mitchell will have more physicality than Said Nurmagomedov. And I kind of like that he's taller here as well. So there's less chance he'll be hunched over. And he can grapple tall against Said Nurmagomedov, you know, which means he may not be as prone to be getting caught by that guillotine. So I'm going to go with Bryce Mitchell. And at the end of the day, there may be a time when you look back in history, and I know this sounds biased, is Said Nurmagomedov Gene Silver level? Is he Ilia Topuria level? Does he hit like Josh Emmett? Riddle me that. I don't think he does. I don't think he hits like Josh Emmett. I don't think he's anywhere near the level of Ilia Topuria or Gene Silver. And those are the guys Bryce has lost to. That needs to be taken into consideration. So I'm going to go with Bryce Mitchell. Dan Ige is a very difficult guy to muscle around. And Mitchell did it. Mitchell was able to muscle him around and get to dominant position. And kind of risky fight because he did get damaged on the feet. But I reckon Bryce has got this one. And I'm going to go with Bryce Mitchell getting this done by decision win. 29-28. It's close, but he does more grappling control, gets the back, fights for chokes, lands some shots here and there at the end of the rounds. And I think Said's going to slow down as this goes on. I'm going with Bryce Mitchell by decision. We move on. Up the card, Nikita Krylov versus Bogdan Guskov. Now, I know everything I told you guys about Nikita Krylov in the past. Very aware of this. Very aware of the way that I hyped up Nikita Krylov before he went out there and swung like a tard and got KO'd by Dominic Reyes. However, I take it all back and I was wrong. Although Nikita Krylov did give Ankalaev a hell of a fight, I just feel like he's too vulnerable and too wild, and I think Guskov's going to catch him. I think Guskov's going to catch Nikita Krylov in this fight. Guskov is so patient, so calm, and he's been hit by some killers. Ryan Spann, although he's dumb, hits fucking hard. And Guskov was eating shots off Ryan Spann and then fucking charging him down and breaking him. That's insane to do, okay? You saw the same thing against Elekana as well. Elekana quit that fight in round 2. He had a good moment in round 1, but then once Guskov started putting that pepper on him and started putting that mustard on him, and maybe this is going to make me walk back the Aslan prediction, but he was giving him the guillotine. Like, a lot of guys, once they get into there and once Bogdan Guskov starts getting on a bit of a roll and starts getting his mojo and his head movement down and landing shots the way that he does, I mean, the way that he finds the chin is like, whoa, this guy's weirdly good even though he shouldn't be, you know? So you know what? I'm going to go with Bogdan Guskov. I don't mind losing to Ozdemir in your debut. It was your debut. And he still gave him a bit of trickiness as well. So I'm going to go with Bogdan Guskov getting this one done against Nikita Krylov by TKO early. And a large factor of this is Nikita Krylov being KO'd a couple of months ago and already looking to be back in there. I don't understand why fighters do this. I don't know who's managing him. I don't know who's guiding him through his career, but do not step back in the cage a couple of months after being flatline KO'd. It's as simple as that. I'll never pick someone who does that. I never will. So I'm going to have to go against Nikita Krylov. I feel like he's urgent. He's been inactive for a while before the Reyes fight, and now he's like, oh, that doesn't even count. I'm getting back in there. I got to get paid. I don't like that. He feels frantic to salvage something of his career right now after all that time off that he had. And listen, the dude was born. As you notice, this flag used to say something else. It now says Russia. The dude was born on the border of Ukraine, and some shit's been going down. So I don't know if that's affected his career in any way, but I reckon Guskov's going to get him. I reckon Guskov's going to get him, in my opinion. TKO, round 1 or 2. I reckon he puts away Krylov. Maybe multiple knockdowns. We move on up the card to another fight, which is Almabayev versus Jose Ochoa. Risky. Very risky here. This is tricky. I think I'm going to go with Jose Ochoa over Almabayev. And I'm worried about that. I am worried about that because Almabayev could out-grapple Jose Ochoa. But when I look at the opponents that Almabayev has been able to out-grapple, Nicolao's spent in his career, and he never wanted to win. Nicolao never wanted to win. He wanted to win a very close split decision every time he fought. He had no grit. He had no firepower. He had nothing for his opponent to worry about in a fight other than being minorly outstruck. That's all they had to worry about. And he did very well against Almabayev, eventually getting dropped in the 3rd round by Almabayev because Nicolao just refused to press any kind of advantage that he had. He wanted split decisions. Nicolao's the prime fighter for that type of thing until he gets chinned. And he was also quite chinny as well as a fighter. Ochoa's only loss is to Lona Kavanagh, and he nearly beat him on short notice. And people will talk about Lona Kavanagh like he's going to take over this division. Ochoa nearly beat him on short notice, and he had Lona Kavanagh really badly hurt to the body in that fight as well. Almabayev, he has a win over that really lanky, tall black dude for the flyweight division that should have never really been there in the first place, but I can't remember his name. He was massive, and he actually beat Jack. I don't know who he beat. There was a UK fighter, Jack Cartwright or something like that, that he actually beat on the Contender Series. Maybe Gomez or something along those lines. Lanky black dude, and Almabayev was able to take him down multiple times in the fight. But these guys aren't Ochoa's level. They aren't Ochoa's level of prospect. Ochoa's really good. He just fucked up a good grappler for the division in Cody Durden and gave him problems off of his back as well. So I think that's what Ochoa's seeing here. He's seeing, I just fought Durden, a guy who's all right on the feet, really high volume and pressure, shorter than me, and loves to grapple and shoot offensively. And I did really good against him, and I felt really good against him. Now I'm going in against another one. So even though this is on short notice, Ochoa has had the training camp that he needs for this. Maybe not entirely based on specifics of what Almabayev does, but in terms of the style of Almabayev, Ochoa's got a training camp in the bank for that style. And he took no damage against Durden. He's already looking to get right back in there. I think Ochoa beats him. Might be an upset pick. Might be an underdog pick. A lot of people disagree with this. I see a lot of people going with Almabayev because I think they feel like he was robbed by Cap because he got eye poked and then finished. But at the same time, I think he was already losing. Second round could go to him. First round went to Cap. Third round, I thought Cap was doing good. But I'm going to go with Ochoa. I'm going to trust in Ochoa. Longer, rangier, good off of his back, a young prospect, a really good prospect, really well trained, high finishing potential, high knockout potential for the flyweight division. I feel like Almabayev might be a little bit small for the division. So I'm going to go with Ochoa to get this one done. I'm going to say Ochoa gets this one done by finish in the first or second round over Almabayev. That's what I'm going for here. Jose Ochoa. And also, this is different than... I think Aslan Almabayev was supposed to be fighting Ramazan Bektemirov. Let me check the rest of the card. No, he was. He was supposed to be fighting Ramazan Bektemirov, who's a short, stocky, grappling-heavy bruiser, who actually, I think, got popped for PEDs, according to Charles Johnson, I think, who Temirov got a very close win over, so he's going to feel definitely going to feel a certain type of fucking way about that. But Temirov's a short, stocky bruiser. Ochoa's rangy and dynamic and dangerous. I feel like Ochoa's going to switch this up on him and take out Aslan Almabayev in the early rounds. We move on. Up the card to another fight. Shara Magomedov versus Marc-Andre Barriault. Ugh, fucking hell. Shara Magomedov's going to win the fight. Marc-Andre Barriault's not at his level. Fucking dead to me. I don't care. Shara Magomedov's such a fucking blatant industry plant. MVP was a tricky matchup for him, and I know they sort of shaped-shifted that one together to try and salvage and make a really good card, but... And, you know, there's welterweight skill and lighter man skill, which has been proven true fucking decade after decade in the sport. Shara Magomedov's getting a layup. Let's not pretend this is anything else. Marc-Andre Barriault is good, and he can pick up volume and pressure on his opponent. Never really seen him ragdolling anyone in grappling. I'm sure he has that aspect to his game. Never seen it. As far as I'm aware, it's not really something I think about for opponents of Marc-Andre Barriault when they're going up against him. Isn't like the grappling aspect. It's more about, are they going to be able to fight for 3 hard rounds if they need to? If they can't and they don't have early rounds finishing potential, then I reckon Andre Barriault will beat them. But Shara Magomedov has kind of made a career out of being very high volume on the back foot. Put it this way. I think Mikhail Oleksiejczuk is a much more dangerous Marc-Andre Barriault. He pressures, he's high volume, he's in your face, he tries to break you. However, he has one thing that separates him from Marc-Andre Barriault, which is Oleksiejczuk can knock you the fuck out and Andre Barriault cannot. Even though I think he might be coming off a first-round TKO, it was pathetic looking. You ain't going to get that on Shara Magomedov. So I'm going to go with Shara Magomedov getting this one done on the back foot. Kicks. I could even see like a head kick off the back foot or some shit like that. Like a lead head kick as Marc-Andre Barriault comes in. Very similar to the one that Ian Gary hit Jordan Williams with. When he hit him with like that fadeaway head kick. I can see Shara Magomedov catching him with the same thing as Barriault comes in. This is a layup, man. I don't like this matchmaking because, listen, we know Shara Magomedov's protected, but there's interesting fights for him. There's way more interesting fights. I want to see someone take on someone that can, like... I hate it when they have a pure striker and they go, don't put him against any grapplers ever. I just hate that. I think that's pathetic. So... And as much as people say Paddy Pimblett was protected, listen, I know the matchups were. At least he fought a difference of fucking styles. Jordan Levitt's a really good grappler. You know, he's really good in his jiu-jitsu. And he fought dangerous people on the feet as well with hands and power. And I just want to see Shara Magomedov diversify his opponents. You know what I mean? And fight some different styles for once. Rather than people that are going to follow him around the ring and let him outstrike them to the distance. So I'm going to go Shara Magomedov getting this one done. Yeah, Petrosian's way better than Barriault. And Shara dealt with him, so... I'm going to go with Shara Magomedov getting this one done. Second or third round TKO after breaking down Marc-Andre Barriault in the first and second. We move on. Up the card to another fight, which is Petr Yan versus Marcus McGhee. Real ones are worried. Real ones are worried for Petr Yan because you know Marcus McGhee's good. 5-rounder, I'm not worried for Petr Yan. I must distinguish that. If this is a 5-rounder, I ain't worried in the slightest for Petr Yan. I think he handles Marcus McGhee in a 5-rounder and does what he wants with him. As it goes on, like he'll have time to deal with what Marcus McGhee's going to give him problems with and then adjust and do what he does. Because we saw Jonathan Martinez dealt with what Marcus McGhee was doing to him and then adjusted and found his answer in low kicks and putting pressure on Marcus McGhee. And he was actually able to really dominantly win the third round. However, Jonathan Martinez, if you watch that fight back, I guess, and I would have a random guess, he had money on himself losing by decision, because after he hurt Marcus McGhee in the third round, go back and watch it, he intentionally made sure he didn't finish him by holding him up against a cage. Maybe retarded, I don't know, but we know that Jonathan Martinez maybe isn't as good as we thought he was, based on some of his other performances, getting schooled by Aldo when some of the other bantamweight prospects actually gave Aldo a hell of a fight, even if you want to call it a robbery. They separated themselves from Jonathan Martinez, at least with their performance. And that makes me more confident in Bryce over Saeed, because Martinez dealt with Saeed. But either way, Marcus McGhee's very good, and he's big for the division, and he's dangerous. Very slick on the feet. People are memeing that he knocked out Topuria because he knocked out that other guy that looks exactly like Topuria in the bantamweight division. I know his name. I can't think of his name, though. Who cares? Marcus McGhee. I reckon he'll win the first round and lose the last two. Pretty straightforward from me. Petr Yan is a different level of fighter perceivably right now than Marcus McGhee. And I'm going to tell you this. From what we've seen at bantamweight recently, when it comes to people not being able to get past Rob Font, when it comes to people not really being able to get past Aldo in his age, which is a guy who Yan dealt with, you know what I mean? But in the first 3 rounds, it was competitive with him anyway, but he fought a much better version of Aldo. Yan really badly beat up on Aldo in that fight and definitely made him a worse version of himself moving forward. But Yan's a different level of fighter, man. And so is Sandhagen to these guys. And so is other fighters that Yan has gone up against compared to these guys. I think O'Malley is the star striker out of the gym that McGhee trains out of. You know, McGhee trains with those guys at MMA Lab. And they do have a history of fighting Yan. And maybe they can work on some things and adjust some things. But I just know the levels of bantamweight are like barrier reefs in terms of how much they plummet every few steps of the way in the rankings. When it comes to the top 5, massive drop-off between Figueiredo and Petr Yan. You know? Then you do another massive drop-off outside the top 10, and another massive drop-off outside the top 15. It's just, there's so many layers to it. And until I see Marcus McGhee deal with a Rob Font first, you know? Can you deal with a Rob Font first? Can you deal with a Marlon Vera first? Can you deal with any of these guys in the rankings that are a proving test? I don't know if Jonathan Martinez is proof. It isn't. 29-28 win over Jonathan Martinez is not proof to me that you will beat Petr Yan in a fight. And also, the fact that I said I trust Yan more in a 5-rounder here, I actually disagree, because in 3-rounders, Yan seems to condense his work. You know what I mean? Some fighters, they take a while to get going. But in Yan's case, when he does have 3-rounders, he gets to it a lot quicker in the first round. So I'm going to say that Yan gets this one done. Tricky first round for him that's close and competitive, but he loses the first round. That's going to be my hot take. Second and third round, he picks up the pressure, beats up on Marcus McGhee. Maybe the third round's a little bit more dominant, and he ends up being, you know, vintage Petr Yan. And we start talking about him versus Merab if he beats Sandhagen. So Marcus McGhee's going to lose 29-28 decision, maybe 29-27, based on the third round potentially being a 10-8 or so, or maybe a finish in the third. Yan's going to get this one done. We move on. Robert Whittaker versus Reinier de Ridder. I'm going to go with Reinier de Ridder. Now, I know I said Bo Nickel would beat him, but I was dumb and retarded. And I was wrong. It's the same thing about the Shara Magomedov MVP fight. Sometimes I think people are so harsh on someone that I like stand up for him. It's the same thing with Jamal Hill with me. I don't think Jamal Hill's terrible, but everyone says he's terrible. So I go, he's actually really good, even though he's kind of just good, you know? So I kind of have a case of doing that sometimes, but I am going to go with Reinier de Ridder, and there's a multitude of reasons. Whittaker's problems have come when he's out physicality'd a lot of the time. And Reinier de Ridder is someone who can out physicality his opponents. He's fought for world championships. His losses come to sauced up Anatoly Malakin at 1FC at heavyweight, where people say he quit. He did, but he was outmatched completely in that fight, size-wise, juice-wise. Look at the fucking state of Malakin in those fights and how red his shoulders and back are. All I'm going to say... but Robert Whittaker, Reinier de Ridder, Reinier Derrida's tall, rangy, got a ton of reach on Whittaker as well. He can be clumsy at times, but I think that actually works against Whittaker. Am I off in saying that? When you're clumsy and different and a little bit unorthodox, it works on Whittaker. Dricus du Plessis being the prime example of this. Going into that fight, I thought, oh, Whittaker's going to fucking school him. Because I've seen Whittaker school all of these fighters that really want to be technical. Cannonier, and sometimes Cannonier's technical against his best interests, you know, when he starts switching to an incorrect stance that he shouldn't be, but he wants to switch stances because switching stances makes me technical. A lot of fighters end up doing that, you know. Marvin Vettori, he's not great, but he's technical. He's technically simple. He does very simple things, and Whittaker schooled him. Same thing with Kelvin Gastelum. Not too much unorthodox stuff. Reinier Derrida's different. He's not going to be out there peppering a 1-1-2 down the pipe with Whittaker, trying to go low kick for low kick with him. He's going to brawl with Whittaker. He's going to try and take him down. He's going to look for opportunities there. If he doesn't get a takedown, he could roll for a leg and try and get top position from there. If he doesn't get a takedown, he could look for a big knee to the body in the clinch against the pocket and against the cage in the pocket and start wearing on Whittaker up against the cage and making him uncomfortable. And Whittaker just had his whole jaw. Whittaker's one of my favorite fighters of all time. So I don't like picking against him because I have to say negative things about him. But Whittaker just had his whole jaw remodeled. You know, Chimaev, everyone said, oh, you know, bullshit. Why are you calling that a bullshit choke when it first happened? Because they didn't know. They thought I was saying Whittaker quit. But Whittaker's whole teeth caved in. Like, Chimaev's choke wasn't a locked-in full squeeze choke. You know, so it was confusing to me when I watched it live. But then finding out about Whittaker's jaw injury going in and his teeth just completely caved in, his lower teeth. And he's had him remodeled. I don't know about that, man. I feel like Reinier Derrida's in his prime right now. He's got all of the momentum off of the Bo Nickel win. Proved himself. Absolutely dominated Bo Nickel. And before you tell me how Bo Nickel had a decent first round, he took down Reinier Derrida. Derrida got back up. Got top position. Was better in the grappling against Bo Nickel than Bo was to him. So, I'm going to go with Reinier Derrida. 6'4", 78 inches of reach. Big for the division. Going to be a lot bigger than Whittaker. Whittaker's had a bunch of hernias in his stomach. I'm thinking about all of the weaknesses and all of the problems that Whittaker's had in his career, and its physicality, its finishing ability, its unorthodox. Those are the three biggest problems Whittaker's had in his career. Size and range, physicality, unorthodox, and whatever the other fucking thing I said was that perfectly summarized Reinier de fucking Ridder. So I'm going to have to go with Reinier Derrida. You know, I've got to go with him here. I reckon he pulls this one off. Reinier Derrida, second or third round finish. I think Whittaker will be doing well early. I think he will have moments. He will make rounds close. He will win a round maybe in the first two. But I think eventually Reinier Derrida will just wear on him and have a bit of blood on his face and a little bit of a grimace, but he'll start getting messy and he'll start looking for elbows in the clinch and start trying to mix things up. So I'm actually going to go with Reinier Derrida getting this one done. He submitted GM3 for crying out loud. A guy that Chimaev wanted no part of the ground game of. Okay? So I'm going to have to go with Reinier Derrida getting this one done. Finish in the third round. I'm going to say TKO. No, I'm going to say submission. I'm going to say submission victory for Reinier Derrida. I think he'll hurt Whittaker into a position where Whittaker's a bit covered in the corner. And maybe Reinier Derrida will look to take the back from there and work the choke position from there. So I'm going to say third round rear naked choke, late second round rear naked choke for Reinier Derrida over Robert Whittaker. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Toodle pip. I'll see you later. Goodbye.